The counterintuitive and deeply painful truth about the avoidance and withdrawal from you is that they're not staying away because you don't matter, or because you're inadequate, or because they don't recognize your value. They're staying away precisely because you are the special one, because you matter more than anyone else matters, because they recognize your value so clearly that it terrifies them, because the significance you hold in their heart and mind is so profound that it threatens their entire defensive structure and forces them to confront vulnerabilities they've spent their entire life protecting against. The avoidant can be with people who don't penetrate their defenses, who don't see them deeply, who don't create genuine intimacy, who don't trigger their attachment system in threatening ways. These relationships feel manageable because the stakes are low. If the relationship ends, the loss is tolerable because the person never mattered that much, never got close enough to threaten their defended equilibrium, never created the kind of attachment that feels dangerous. But you are different. You saw them in ways others don't see them. You understood them in ways others don't understand them. You created safety that allowed them glimpses of vulnerability they can't access with others. You touched parts of them that remain untouched by everyone else. You matter to them in ways that feel overwhelming and destabilizing. And this mattering, this significance, this specialness is precisely what makes being close to you feel unbearably threatening to their defended system. When you're special, when you truly matter, the potential loss becomes catastrophic rather than manageable. When you're special, when you see them deeply, the vulnerability required to sustain connection feels exposing and dangerous rather than tolerable. When you're special, when they're genuinely attached, their defensive patterns are insufficient to manage the anxiety and the fear that genuine attachment creates. The avoidance stays away from you, not because you failed to be special enough, but because you succeeded in being too special, too significant, too important. You penetrated defenses they need to feel safe. You created attachment that feels threatening rather than comfortable. You became someone whose loss would devastate them, and their defensive system responds to this threat not by moving closer, but by creating distance that prevents the devastating loss they fear. The tragic irony is that by staying away to protect themselves from losing you, they guarantee they lose you. But they lose you on their terms, through their choice, in ways they can control, rather than being abandoned or rejected in ways that would activate their core wounds. Why being special makes you more threatening than being ordinary? The avoidant person finds you more threatening precisely because you're special, because you matter deeply, because the connection with you is significant in ways that other connections are not. Understanding why your specialness creates threat rather than comfort reveals the paradox at the heart of avoidant attachment and explains why the very qualities that should bring you closer instead push you apart. Being special makes you more threatening because it means you have power to hurt them deeply, power that ordinary people in their life don't have. The avoidant has learned through painful experiences that caring deeply about someone, being attached to someone, needing someone creates vulnerability to being hurt when that person leaves or disappoints or rejects. Their defensive system is organized around preventing this hurt by preventing deep attachment. When someone is ordinary to them, when they don't care that much, the person lacks power to hurt them significantly. If the relationship ends, if the person disappoints them, if the person leaves, the impact is minimal because the attachment was shallow. But when you're special, when you truly matter, you have enormous power to hurt them. If you leave, it would devastate them. If you reject them, it would confirm their deepest fears about being unlovable. If you see their wounds and judge them, it would be unbearable because your opinion matters. This power you hold through being special is terrifying to someone whose entire system is organized around preventing anyone from having power to hurt them. Being special makes you more threatening because it means genuine attachment has formed that could activate their abandonment wounds if loss occurs. The avoidance core wound is abandonment. They were abandoned emotionally or literally in childhood, and their defensive system developed, to protect against re-experiencing this pain. When someone doesn't matter much, losing them doesn't activate abandonment wounds because there was never sufficient attachment for the loss to feel like abandonment. But when you're special, when genuine attachment has formed, losing you would feel like the abandonment they experienced in childhood and would activate all the pain and terror they've been defending against their entire life. Your specialness means you have capacity to wound them at their core, to activate their deepest pain, to make them feel the abandonment fear they've organized their life around avoiding. This potential to activate core wounds makes being close to you feel dangerous in ways that being close to ordinary people doesn't feel dangerous. Being special makes you more threatening because it means they would have more to lose, making the stakes of the relationship feel unbearably high. With ordinary relationships, the stakes are low. If it doesn't work out, the avoidant loses someone they didn't care about that much anyway. The loss is manageable, the grief is tolerable, the impact on their life is minimal. But with you, the stakes are high. They care about you deeply. The connection is meaningful. You matter to them more than others matter. If the relationship doesn't work out, if they lose you, the loss would be significant and painful and would affect them profoundly. These high stakes create anxiety because there's so much to lose. And the avoidance defensive system responds to high stakes not by trying harder to make the relationship work, but by withdrawing to lower the stakes, by creating distance that makes the potential loss less devastating, by staying away so they don't become even more attached and have even more to lose. Being special makes you more threatening because it means they would have to be vulnerable in ways they're not required to be vulnerable with people who don't see them as deeply. With ordinary people who interact only with their defended exterior, the avoidant can maintain their defenses without it damaging the connection because the other person isn't looking for depth anyway. But you see beneath their defenses, you recognize their patterns as protection. You want to know their authentic self. Being in relationship with you would require genuine vulnerability, would require lowering defenses, would require showing you the wounded parts they usually hide. This requirement for vulnerability feels threatening because vulnerability is precisely what their defensive system is designed to prevent. Your specialness, your ability to see them deeply, means you cannot be satisfied with surface connection. And the depth of connection you require feels too exposing and too dangerous for them to sustain. Being special makes you more threatening because it means you create in them desire and longing that conflicts with their defended need for independence and control. With people who aren't special, the avoidant doesn't experience strong desire or longing. They can take the relationship or leave it. They don't feel pulled toward the person in ways that threaten their independence. But you create genuine desire in them. They want you. They long for connection with you. They feel pulled toward you in ways they don't feel pulled toward others. This desire is threatening because it challenges their defended independence, makes them feel things they usually don't allow themselves to feel, and creates pull toward connection that conflicts with their need for distance and control. The intensity of their desire for you is evidence of your specialness. But this very intensity makes being close to you feel dangerous because it means you have power over them through their desire, power to pull them toward vulnerability and attachment they're defending against. Being special makes you more threatening because it means losing you would prove their worst fear, that they're incapable of sustaining love with someone who truly matters. The avoidant can lose ordinary relationships without it challenging their self-concept because these relationships don't test their capacity for genuine intimacy. But if they lose you, if they cannot sustain relationship with someone who is special and significant, it proves something painful about their limitations. It proves they cannot handle real intimacy even when they want it. It proves their defensive patterns destroy what they value most. It proves they're fundamentally incapable of sustaining love with someone who penetrates their defenses and who matters deeply. This proof of their limitations is something they want to avoid confronting. And staying away from you allows them to avoid this confrontation, allows them to not test whether they can sustain what matters most, allows them to not face definitive evidence of their incapacity. How your significance triggers their deepest fears about loss and vulnerability. Your significance to the avoidant person directly triggers the two core fears that organize their defensive structure: fear of loss and abandonment, and fear of vulnerability and being truly known. Understanding how your specialness activates these fears reveals why they respond to caring deeply about you by creating distance rather than by moving closer. Your significance triggers their fear of loss because the more you matter, the more devastating losing you would be. And the avoidant has learned to manage loss anxiety by preventing deep attachment rather than by risking attachment and potential loss. The avoidant learned in childhood that attachment leads to pain when the person you're attached to leaves or disappoints or fails to meet your needs. Rather than learning that some losses are survivable or that the joy of attachment is worth the risk of loss, they learn to prevent the loss by preventing the attachment. This defensive strategy works with people who don't matter much. If you're not attached, loss doesn't hurt. But with you, attachment has already formed. Whether they intended it to or not, you matter to them deeply. They care about you in ways they don't care about others. This attachment means that losing you would hurt tremendously. And this anticipated pain of potential loss creates anxiety that the avoidant manages by creating distance. If they stay away from you, if they prevent the attachment from deepening further, they limit how much losing you could hurt. The distance is an attempt to manage their fear of loss by controlling the depth of attachment. Your significance triggers their fear of abandonment specifically because the more they care about you, the more power you have to abandon them. And abandonment by someone who truly matters would be a re-traumatization of their core wound. The avoidance defensive structure was formed in response to abandonment experiences where people they needed were not consistently available, where depending on someone led to being let down or left. They protect against re-experiencing this pain by not allowing themselves to need anyone. By maintaining independence, that means no one's presence or absence is critical, but with you, they've allowed need to develop. They want you. They feel attached to you. You matter in ways that mean your presence enhances their life, and your absence would diminish it. This need makes them vulnerable to abandonment in ways they haven't been vulnerable since childhood. If you leave, if you decide they're not worth the difficulty of their patterns, if you abandon them, it would activate their core wound and would confirm their deepest fear that they're unlovable and that depending on anyone leads to pain. The intensity of this fear in relation to you specifically because you're special, because you matter, makes being close to you feel too risky. Your significance triggers their fear of vulnerability because you see them in ways that require them to either continue hiding, which creates distance and disconnection, or to allow themselves to be fully known, which feels terrifying and exposing. With people who aren't special, with people who don't see deeply, the avoidant can maintain their defenses without it creating obvious problems because the other person isn't looking for depth anyway. Surface connection is sufficient for relationships that don't matter much, but you see beneath their surface. You recognize their patterns. You understand their wounds. You want to know their authentic self. This creates a situation where continuing to hide feels inauthentic and creates distance from you, but allowing you to fully know them feels unbearably vulnerable. They're trapped between two threatening options: hide and lose intimacy with you, or be vulnerable and risk the exposure and potential rejection they fear. Both options feel dangerous, and often the avoidant responds by creating physical distance that removes the requirement to choose between these threatening options. Your significance triggers their fear that if you truly know them, know their wounds, their damage, their struggles, their limitations, you will reject them as unlovable or too broken. The avoidant's core belief is that their authentic self is unacceptable, that if anyone truly knew them, they would be rejected. With people who aren't special, this fear is manageable because their opinion doesn't matter much. If they saw the authentic self and rejected it, it would be unpleasant, but wouldn't be devastating. But your opinion matters. Your acceptance matters. Your continued presence in their life matters. This means that if you truly knew them and rejected them, it would be a catastrophic confirmation of their worst fear. The stakes of being vulnerable with you are so high that it feels safer to stay away, to never fully test whether you would accept or reject their authentic self, to live with the ambiguity rather than risking definitive rejection from someone whose acceptance would mean everything. Your significance triggers their fear that being close to you will require ongoing vulnerability and emotional availability they don't know if they can sustain. Being special to them means you won't accept surface connection indefinitely. You'll want emotional intimacy, ongoing vulnerability, consistent emotional availability. You'll want them to share their feelings, to communicate about difficulties, to maintain emotional presence even when it's uncomfortable. The avoidant knows that sustaining this level of emotional engagement is difficult or impossible for them given their current capacity. They know their patterns will eventually emerge. They'll want to withdraw, they'll feel suffocated, they'll need distance. Being with you would require sustaining a vulnerability and presence they're not confident they can sustain. And the fear of failing, of disappointing you, of proving they cannot be what you need makes staying away feel safer than trying and failing. And your significance triggers their fear of losing themselves or being engulfed if they allow themselves to fully merge with someone who matters this much. The avoidant sense of self is fragile and is maintained through defended boundaries and an emphasis on independence. They fear that if they allow themselves to truly need someone, to be interdependent, to merge lives and hearts, they will lose their individual identity and will be consumed by the relationship. With people who aren't special, this fear is minimal because they never allow enough closeness for engulfment to be possible. But with you, with someone who matters deeply, the pull toward closeness and interdependence is strong. And this pull triggers terror of losing themselves. The more they care about you, the more they want to be close to you, the more they fear that this closeness will erase their individual identity and will leave them vulnerable to being controlled or consumed. The painful paradox where what makes you special makes you dangerous. The avoidant person experiences a painful paradox where the very qualities that make you special and valuable are the same qualities that make you feel dangerous and threatening to their defended equilibrium. Understanding this paradox reveals why they simultaneously want you and push you away, why they recognize your value while staying distant, why being exactly right for them makes relationship nearly impossible. The quality that makes you special, your ability to see beneath their defenses to who they really are, is the same quality that makes you dangerous because being seen means being vulnerable and potentially exposed. You see them. You recognize their patterns as defenses. You perceive their wounds and their struggles. You understand them at a deep level that others don't reach. This seeing is what makes you special. It's rare to be truly seen, to have someone recognize who you are beneath your defenses. The avoidant longs for this seeing because it addresses a fundamental human need to be known. But this same seeing is dangerous because it means they cannot hide from you, cannot maintain the defended image they show others, cannot pretend to be only their independent, together exterior. Being seen means being vulnerable, means someone has access to parts of themselves they usually protect, means they're exposed in ways that feel threatening, even though it's also what they long for. The quality that makes you special, your acceptance of their wounds, and your compassion for their struggles is the same quality that makes you dangerous, because acceptance creates safety that invites vulnerability they're not sure they can sustain. You accept them with their damage and their patterns. You respond to their wounds with compassion rather than judgment. You understand why they struggle, and you don't condemn them for it. This acceptance is what makes you special. Most people would judge or reject them if they saw their wounds, but you offer acceptance that's rare and precious. But this acceptance is dangerous because it creates safety, and safety invites vulnerability. When they feel safe with you, they want to lower their defenses, to be authentic, to show you more of themselves. but lowering defenses feels terrifying, and sustaining the vulnerability that your safety invites feels like more than they can maintain. The acceptance that makes you special creates conditions for intimacy they want but fear they cannot handle. The quality that makes you special, your patience with their patterns while maintaining your own worth, is the same quality that makes you dangerous because this balance both validates them and challenges them to grow. You're patient with their withdrawal and their difficulty with intimacy. You try to understand rather than immediately giving up. This patience is what makes you special. Most people don't have the capacity to be patient with avoidant patterns, but you also maintain your own worth, your own needs, your own boundaries. You don't become a doormat or lose yourself in their patterns. This maintenance of worth challenges them to grow, to recognize their patterns are problematic, to consider changing. The combination of patience and maintained worth is perfect for their growth, but it's also dangerous because it creates productive discomfort that invites change they're not sure they're ready for or capable of. The quality that makes you special, the depth of connection and intimacy you offer, is the same quality that makes you dangerous because depth requires sustained vulnerability that triggers their intimacy anxiety. You offer genuine intimacy, emotional depth, real connection. This depth is what makes you special. Surface connection is easy to find, but depth is rare. The avoidant wants this depth because it addresses their unmet needs for genuine connection. But depth requires ongoing vulnerability, requires staying emotionally present, requires tolerating closeness that eventually triggers anxiety. The more depth they achieve with you, the more anxious they become. Because depth means high attachment and high stakes and high vulnerability. The depth that makes you special is the same depth that eventually becomes unbearable to their defended system. The quality that makes you special, your genuine care and investment in them, is the same quality that makes you dangerous because care creates obligation and pressure they fear they cannot meet. You care about them genuinely. You invest in the relationship. You want good things for them and for the connection. This care is what makes you special. Genuine care is precious and rare, but care also creates implicit obligation to reciprocate, to care back, to invest similarly, to meet your needs as you're trying to meet theirs. The avoidant fears they cannot meet this obligation, cannot reciprocate appropriately, cannot be what you need them to be. Your care creates pressure to show up in ways they're not confident they can sustain. And this pressure makes being with you feel threatening, even though your care is exactly what they need. The quality that makes you special, the fact that you matter deeply to them, is the same quality that makes you dangerous, because mattering means having power to hurt them. You matter more than others matter. The connection with you is significant in ways other connections aren't. This mattering is what makes you special. To deeply matter to someone is beautiful and meaningful, but mattering gives you power over them through their caring. If you leave, it hurts deeply. If you reject them, it devastates them. If you judge them, it matters profoundly. The power you hold through mattering to them is threatening because it means they're vulnerable to you in ways they're not vulnerable to people who don't matter. And this vulnerability is precisely what they've spent their life protecting against. What their distance because of your specialness means for you. The recognition that the avoidant stays away specifically because you're the special one, because you matter too much rather than not enough, has important implications for how you understand the situation and how you make decisions about your own healing and your future. Understanding what their distance means for you protects you from internalizing their withdrawal as evidence of your inadequacy, while also clarifying that their recognition of your specialness doesn't obligate you to wait or to accept insufficient love. Their distance because of your specialness means that the problem is fundamentally about their capacity and their wounds, not about your inadequacy or lack of value. This is crucial to understand for your healing because it's easy to internalize the avoidant withdrawal as evidence that you weren't good enough, weren't special enough, weren't worth fighting their fears for. But the truth is the opposite. You were too special, too significant, too important. And this specialness triggered fears that people who matter less don't trigger. Their withdrawal is about their inability to handle how much you matter, not about you not mattering enough. Understanding this distinction protects your self-worth from being damaged by their distance and helps you recognize that their limitations are not commentary on your value. Their distance because of your specialness means that you created a profound impact on them that will last regardless of whether the relationship continues. And this impact is validation of your significance. Even though it doesn't create the relationship you wanted, you touched them deeply. You saw them in ways others don't see them. You created connection that matters more than other connections matter. You're the standard against which others are measured. This impact is real and is a testament to who you are and what you offered. The fact that they cannot sustain connection with you doesn't diminish the impact you had or the specialness of what you offered. It proves how significant you were, since people who matter less don't create the threat that makes avoidance flee. Your specialness is validated by your impact, not negated by their withdrawal. Their distance because of your specialness means that their loss is greater than your loss. That they're losing someone irreplaceable while you're losing someone incapable of receiving what you offer. You're special, rare in your capacity to see deeply, to accept wounds, to be patient while maintaining worth, to offer genuine intimacy. These qualities make you valuable, not just to the avoidant, but to anyone capable of receiving them. You will find others who can appreciate what you offer because what you offer is genuinely valuable. But the avoidant is losing someone special who they're unlikely to find again. Someone who saw them and accepted them, someone who created safety for their vulnerability, someone who understood their patterns and still chose them. The asymmetry of loss means they have more to regret than you have to regret, because you can find another person capable of receiving you, while they are unlikely to find another person who offers what you offered. Their distance because of your specialness means you should not wait for them or organize your life around hope they'll overcome their fears, because their recognition of your specialness without corresponding action is insufficient. They know you're special. They recognize your value. They understand what they're losing. But this recognition doesn't translate into doing the work to address their wounds, into challenging their fears, into developing capacity to be with you. Recognition without action is meaningless. Their knowing you're special while staying away proves that knowing alone is insufficient, that awareness doesn't create capacity. You deserve someone who not only recognizes your specialness, but who can show up for it, who can receive it, who can reciprocate it. Waiting for the avoidant to maybe someday overcome their fears wastes time you could spend with someone who already has capacity to be with someone special.